Greetings, friends, fellow citizens, fellow patriots, and even non-citizens, and welcome to this week's edition of the We the People Convention Weekly News and Opinion podcast. I want to wish those of you of the Christian faith a very blessed Easter, and those of the Jewish faith, a happy Passover. I think that's the proper way to say that. And, this is a very important time for, the religions of the world. And with all the events that are going on, we certainly don't lose track of what's really important. And that is, faith and belief in God and belief in a future that is determined by God and not by man. So welcome to all of you. This podcast, my name, by the way, is Tom Zawistowski. I'm the host of this podcast, and I'm the president of the We the People Convention organization. This organization is supported by the generous donors to the We the People Convention who pay for not only this podcast, but the emails and text messages we put out all week to promote the podcast and our wonderful website. And they also pay for our activities to support candidates and organizations that are helping to fight the fight to do what? To protect and defend your and my individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. So today is Saturday, April 4th, and it's a beautiful day here in Northeast Ohio, though I think we're probably not going to have such great weather for Easter, but April is a turning point as, spring starts to come around, and, it's been a long, cold, lonely winter, but hopefully better days are to come. I want to just open by reading you this quote that Glenn Beck shared this week to kind of set the tone for this podcast and for everything that you're experiencing. He quoted Thomas Jefferson, and I looked it up, it's an actual quote. Jefferson said, "The man who never looks into a newspaper is better informed than he who reads them, inasmuch as he who knows nothing is nearer to truth than he whose mind is filled with falsehoods and errors. He who reads nothing will still learn the great facts, and the details are all false." And so Glenn Beck was saying, that you could substitute social media for newspapers, because it's just beyond belief that you can print such absolute total lies and pretend you're a journalist. It's just disgusting. And so I pray, I work hard to make this show not that, to make it informative, to make you feel like you are learning things that you didn't know that are true. And if they're not true, I expect you to write to me at info@wethepeopleconvention.com, wethepeopleconvention.org, and say, "Tom, that's not true," or "Here's an article that talks about that," or, helps me keep on the path of truth, because you just can't live a life of lies. You can't lie to yourself, particularly. You can't lie to your spouse, your family, your children, your community. You can't lie. You must live in truth to live a fulfilling life, even if that truth is hard and a truth you don't want to live. It's better to face the truth than to live a life of lies. But we are just being inundated with lies, and I'll point some of that out during this podcast. But I pray that you will be more intelligent for having watched this podcast than you would be if you did not. So welcome to all of you. Those who've been following us since the Portage County Tea Party days and the Ohio Liberty Coalition and the We the People Convention's founding. To those of you who are just joining us this week because you saw something on Facebook or on Instagram or YouTube Shorts or Gab or Getter or MeWe, all the places where we post our information. Welcome to you. We're here to share the truth about what's going on in our world and our nation that impacts your and my individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. So as we rise this morning, the thing that is on our minds, and I ask for your prayers all day long that we can find this pilot. U.S. pilot rescued after fighter jet downed in Iran. Second American aircraft also down in the Mideast. But the bottom line is the second pilot of the F-15 has not been recovered yet. Now, the Iranians desperately want to capture him, desperately want to make an example of him, like they did 47 years ago with the hostages from the U.S. Embassy, right? They would love nothing better than to try to do that. Now, President Trump has said it will not influence what he does, though you can bet the propaganda, the media in this country, oh my gosh, even now, an F-15 went down. We don't know if it was shot down. It looks like it was. And then several of the aircraft that were going in to try to find the pilots, one of them got shot down. And then a A-10 Warthog went down yesterday. But the pilot ejected and was fine, was safe. And so we're missing one of the pilots of the F-15. And so it's amazing how it's like, what a disaster. We had 2 planes shot down. We've done 12,000 missions, and we have 2 aircraft that are down. And people act like, oh, this is terrible. It's called war. It's called war. And if you go to war, President Trump said on day one, there's going to be casualties. And it's a miracle, literally. It's absolutely astonishing that we've had as few casualties as we've had. And now there are stories out there, right? There are stories out there that they're lying to us, that there's more casualties than the Defense Department is saying and all that, okay? And most of it's wounded. It looks to me that we've had like 140 soldiers wounded. We haven't had that many deaths. We had the tanker that 3 Ohio airmen were on, and I think there's a crew of 7 who died. So we've had some deaths. But are there like huge amounts of deaths? Are we lying like Vietnam? No. I reject that. And we'll see. I mean, again, never doubt the ability of the government to lie to us. But from what I can see, from what you feed to me, I don't see that. But this morning, we are praying that we can find that airman and rescue him before the Iranians get to him. That's the news that I'm hoping to hear today. So I posted last Sunday a story, Iran war update, because there's so much going on. It's really hard to keep up with it on our website. We don't have that big of a staff that can be posting stuff, every hour, and there's so much going on. So this story was a recap, and it was a good, just kind of bullet points. So you may want to go there as a starting point. But in this story, first thing says Trump says Iran strikes ongoing with thousands of military targets remaining. That's true. This week we hit several thousand more. There were serious U.S. casualties at a Saudi base. Iran fired 6 ballistic missiles and 29 drones at Saudi Arabia's Prince Sultan Air Base last Friday, and it wounded 15 Americans. Now, again, people were talking about, massive casualties. Literally, I saw the line, massive casualties when that story broke. 15 troops injured. It's not massive casualties in anyone's book. It's not good. We don't want to see any of our servicemen injured. But again, perspective. Next thing in this story was more than 3,500 U.S. troops arrive in Middle East as Iran war strikes intensify. And so the Marines and the 82nd Airborne, they're arriving now. They're in theater. And so lots of people are thinking there's going to be some sort of a invasion force, either Karg Island or along the Straits of Hormuz. We don't know yet. They're there. They haven't been used yet. Gulf states under sustained fire casualties as 6 wounded in missile strikes in Abu Dhabi. Bahrain intercepts waves of missiles and drones near the United States 5th Fleet Base. And Kuwait reports damage to Marbach al-Kabir Port and Sawaki Port. So the Iranians have not stopped attacking fellow Muslim countries. Every one of them in the Gulf have been attacked. And Iran did allow 20 ships through the Straits of Hormuz this week. Pakistan said that. Pakistan's kind of serving that as an intermediary, okay? And then this final point in this story says, U.S. expends billions on Operation Epic Fury. Battle damage and replacement of losses over the first 3 weeks of the war likely costs roughly $1.4 billion to $2.9 billion, according to the Wall Street Journal. Okay? Now that's true. Put it in perspective. You know what $2.9 billion is? That's 1/4 of 1% of the $1 trillion U.S. defense budget. Not 25% of the trillion, 1/4 of 1%. To put that in perspective, the Somali fraud in Minnesota was $9 billion. $6 billion more, 3 times more than the war has cost so far. Perspective, truth. They don't put that in the story. They just say, oh, it's $2.9 billion. You should be worried, should be upset. Yeah. Perspective. This, we talked last week about the threat that the Houthis in Yemen would attack shipping in the Red Sea and further make this a mess. Well, an interesting thing happened after we talked about that. Houthis entered the Iran war with missile attack on Israel. That's the key point, the key part. A spokesman for Iran-aligned Houthi terrorist organization in Yemen said on March 28th that group had entered the Middle East conflict, launching a missile attack against Israel that Tel Aviv said was intercepted. Yan Shari, spokesperson of the group's military wing, said Houthi forces had carried out the first military operation using ballistic missiles targeting sensitive Israeli military sites in southern occupied Palestine, adding that operations would continue until the aggression against all fronts of resistance ceases. While Syria said the strike successfully achieved its objective, the Israeli military described the attack as a single missile launched from Yemen that was intercepted. All show. Nothing there. They did not attack shipping. That's an important detail. So when you see that headline, oh, Houthis enter the war? Yeah, it's not the whole story, is it? It's not the whole story. This is a big part of the whole story because President Trump has made clear that the objectives were to eliminate the ability for Iran to have nuclear weapons, to eliminate the ability for Iran to have intercontinental ballistic missiles, and to eliminate their ability to continue to build those things in the future. So this story broke, and I think it's significant, didn't get a lot of play. Israeli military analysts, U.S. bunker busters strike in an entombed Iranian uranium deep underground, avoiding high-risk ground op. So as we're surging military, Army and Marines into the theater, there was talk of we would have this, this airborne assault on wherever the uranium was for Iran, and then this happens. The recent massive U.S. strike near Iran's central city of Isfahan likely sought to render Iran's remaining highly enriched uranium stockpiles inaccessible by burying it deep underground, a strategy that would negate the need for a prolonged and risky U.S. ground operation to extract the material, according to an Israeli military analyst on Tuesday. Running on Ynet on Tuesday, military analyst Ron Ben-Yashi, a veteran correspondent and Israel Prize recipient, assessed the strike that reflected a deliberate U.S. effort to neutralize Iran's enriched uranium stockpile by entombing it beneath rock, soil, and collapse an infrastructure rather than attempting to remove it by force. He began when he described as one of the central unresolved issues of the conflict, Iran's remaining stockpile of roughly 440 kilograms or 970 pounds of uranium enriched to 60%. The stockpile, he wrote, remains a major concern for both Washington and Jerusalem. A ground operation, he wrote, would require more than 1,000 troops and the establishment of an airstrip at sites such as Natanz and Nisram to sustain the force, and heavy engineering equipment capable of opening sealed tunnels, diggers, bulldozers, things like that, all while exposing U.S. personnel to casualties and requiring a sustained military presence in Iran until that operation was finished. The alternative, he argued, is to neutralize uranium by burying it so thoroughly that Iran would need at least a year to locate and recover it, buying the United States and Israel time to detect and disrupt any such effort going forward, meaning make it inaccessible so they can't use it as a weapon, and when they start to try to dig for it, you bomb them again, and you bomb them again, and you bomb them again until they finally get the message, we're not going to let them do that. I certainly prefer that to a ground operation, okay? But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Then Trump, was saying they want to make a deal, but if they don't, we're going to just bomb them into the Stone Age. And there was a story that says Iran has necessary will to end the war, but seeking guarantees. I think it's a prime minister told the EU. Iranian president, Mossad Pezeshkian, said on Tuesday his country had the necessary will to end the ongoing war with Israel and the United States, but seeing guarantees that the conflict would not be repeated. Well, that's really up to you. Stop enriching uranium, stop building intercontinental ballistic missiles. Yeah, it won't be repeated. We possess the necessary will to end this conflict, provided that essential conditions are met, especially the guarantees required to prevent repetition of the aggression, he said in a phone conversation with the president of the European Council, according to a statement from his office. Okay? So Trump says they're talking with some more reasonable people in Iran, but, it's chaos there. Who's in charge? No one really knows, okay? And at the same time, there's a story that the Iranians are refusing to meet with the Americans in Pakistan, as Pakistan is trying to broker a deal. So, it's still going to take more. And as Trump said in his speech to the nation on Wednesday, that, we're not going to stop till the job's done. We didn't do this just flippantly. We're not just putting a shot across your bow. We have clear goals that we're going to accomplish. However, he also made it clear that he was not going to, just the Straits of Hormuz being opened was not our problem. It was Europe and Asia's and the Middle East problem. Okay, so that's playing out, and that's an interesting part of this. So this was a big story because I've been saying to you, once this happens, it's a whole different game. The UAE is willing to join the fight, help the U.S. allied forces open the Straits of Hormuz. The Gulf nation is actively exploring ways to assume a military role, such as a move would make the UAE the first Persian Gulf country to join the war directly. According to new reports, that the Arab official said, it comes as Iran continues to attack the UAE and other Gulf states in response to Israeli-U.S. attacks on their country. They have to do something because they're being bombed every day. There's more missiles being launched at Arab nations than at Israel. That's the fact. Such a move would make the UAE the first Persian Gulf country to join the conflict directly. This also comes as President Donald Trump lashed out at our allies on Tuesday for not doing more to support the U.S. war effort against Iran, telling them to go get your own oil and saying the security of the Straits of Hormuz was not America's responsibility. The United Arabs is now reportedly pushing for the United Nations Security Council resolution to permit such an action against Iran. The international countries have also called on the U.S. military powers in Europe and Asia to come together and form a coalition to open the straits, and that's what's going on. So what happened, even after Trump rips Britain, just Starmer is just being just attacked by Trump daily, calling them everything but outright cowards. Starmer held a 40-nation call about opening the Straits of Hormuz. As Iran's de facto blockade of the Strait of Hormuz continues, Britain is hosting virtual talks with about 40 countries to discuss strategies to reopen the waterway, through which 20% of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas supplies are shipped from Gulf producers in peacetime. Its blockade has sent global oil prices soaring above $100 a barrel, a jump of roughly 40% from before the war, forcing countries, particularly in Asia, to ration fuel and cut industrial production. On Thursday, Malaysia ordered a civil servants to work from home in a bid to conserve energy, and China, have put restrictions about airline aviation fuel, and that's why Trump made a comment in his speech to the nation on Wednesday night that, hey, we've got plenty of aviation fuel, buy it from the U.S. Just poking the bear. The U.S. is not taking part in these talks after Trump said this week that it was not its responsibility to reopen the strait. What is the United Kingdom's meeting agenda and who is attending? Well, the people who were attending were France, the Netherlands, Germany, Italy, Canada, Australia, and the United Arab Emirates and more, because there were 40 countries. And what were they talking about? Ahead of the talks, Starmer said countries would assess all viable diplomatic and political measures that we can take to restore freedom of navigation, guarantee the safety of trapped ships and seafarers, and resume the movement of vital commodities. Following that meeting, he will also convene our military planners to look at how we can marshal our capabilities and make the straits accessible and safe after the fighting has stopped. So Trump is pushing them. It's their problem, and they're going to have to do it, because I think Trump, if we get what we want, Trump will say, okay, we're done. Ball's in your court. That's what I think is going to happen. But there's developments. There was a story about these 3 tankers made it through the straits, avoiding Iranian's approved corridor. So Iran has been still trying to put a toll booth on the Straits of Hormuz, but some ships are getting through. 2 oil tankers and a liquefied natural gas ship appear to have made it through the Straits of Hormuz on April 3rd, according to reports from maritime tracking apps. In a post on X, tankertracker.com said the ships were the Dalhut carrying 2 million barrels of Saudi oil, the Habrut laden with $2 million of crude from the United Arab Emirates, and the Sonar LNG traveling for the United Arab Emirates. The Vessel Finder website reported all 3 vessels had made it through the Straits of Hormuz and were stationed off the coast of Oman, not far from the capital, on April 3rd. They didn't go through the normal path of the Straits of Hormuz, where the Iranians have focused, the bottleneck. They actually went right along the shore of Oman, which is right at the tip of the land that pinches of the Straits of Hormuz, and they got through. So, everybody's trying to find a way through this, and that's the nature of war. That's the nature of war. In the meantime, we're just pounding them. Okay, the Iranians just pounding them. So Netanyahu, with a Passover, speech, said this: Iran is no longer an existential threat. Joint op, crush terror regime. Trump says war won't last much longer. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared on Tuesday that Iran no longer poses an existential threat to Israel after what he described as months of joint U.S.-Israeli operations that crippled Tehran's nuclear and missile capabilities, while President Donald Trump said the war is nearing its end and won't last much longer. In a recorded statement released ahead of Passover, which began Wednesday night, Netanyahu said Israel has achieved enormous accomplishments. Its campaign against Iran and its regional terror proxies, casting operation as both a battlefield success and a strategic turning point. On the eve of the Festival of Freedom, Israel is stronger than ever. Iran can no longer threaten our existence. The Ayatollah regime in Iran is weaker than ever. The state of Israel is stronger than ever, he said. Netanyahu said the joint campaign with the United States systemically targeted Iran's nuclear program, ballistic missile capabilities, regime infrastructure, internal security force, senior leadership, while also battering Tehran's regional terror networks. Over the years, he said, now get this, Iran poured nearly $1 trillion into its nuclear program, missile production, and armed proxies. That trillion has now gone down the drain, Netanyahu said. And it has. Framing the operation in Passover terms, Netanyahu said Israel and its allies had delivered 10 plagues to the axis of evil, from Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Houthis in Yemen, to what he described as 5 direct blows against Iran itself, including strikes on its nuclear program, missiles, regime infrastructure, security apparatus, and top officials. Most significantly, said the command had removed the 2 threats that long defined Israel's strategic calculus: Iran's race towards nuclear weapons and its effort to build a massive ballistic missile arsenal. And Iran, he said, has been moving to bury the industrial capacity behind those programs deep underground in order to place it beyond Israel's reach, and we destroyed it. So the Iranians were building this stuff underground, and the U.S. and Israel have attacked that and destroyed their underground capabilities. So Israel seems ready to move away from direct conflict as things start to get wrapped up here. That's how I read that. So, and then this was really a kind of just an aside, but interesting because I think it's important. Knesset approves death penalty for terrorist bill. Netanyahu in favor. The Knesset plenum passed a law mandating the death penalty for terrorists in Israel in a final reading on Monday evening. The bill passed with 62 lawmakers in favor, 48 against, and 1 abstaining. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu arrived at the Knesset to vote in favor of the controversial legislation, openly showing his support. The bill, which was sponsored by far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir Azma, his Yahedet party, I'm sorry, I'm just not good with these Jewish names, according to its proponents, act as a deterrent against terror and serves a measure of justice for victims of terrorism. He pushed the legislation since the start of his tenure as National Security Minister. Upon passage of the bill, he celebrated, saying, "Today, the state of Israel changes the rules of the game. Anyone who murders Jews will no longer breathe freely or enjoy prison privileges." This also ends something that we all thought was strange all along, and that was these exchanges. Whenever there'd be these exchanges of Palestinian prisoners for 8 Jewish hostages, it was like 1,000 to 1. Well, if they start to execute terrorists that are caught, they won't be there to be exchanged, would they? Very interesting, very interesting. And then one last note on the war, because this was kind of interesting in the mix of things. Pete Hegseth gives the Army Chief of Staff his walking papers. So this is going on. Trump has his speech, and then Secretary of War Pete Hegseth has directed Army Chief of Staff General Randy George to step down from his post and retire effective immediately. This leaves the institutional army without a chief of staff in the midst of a war with Iran. Fortunately, it will have little to no effect on military operations, as those are under the purview of U.S. Central Command. Okay? So again, this guy is the military, Army Chief of Staff, and his job doesn't matter. So why do we have him in the first place? But there's more to this story. I think this is the real part of it. George was confirmed to a 4-year term as Army Chief of Staff in September of 2023 during the Biden era. He previously served as the military assistant to Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin from 21 to 2022. That's why he's gone, because Lloyd Austin was a traitor. Lloyd Austin should be charged with treason for what he did to Trump and during the Trump years. So this guy is gone. I think it's a good sign. The people that we don't need. Get rid of them. It's time. Stop paying people who are not only not with us, they're fighting against us. Don't need that on our team, guys. We don't need that on our team. All right. So it was a big week. I just covered the war, but then we had all the stuff happening, and boy, it was like Wednesday was ground zero. Okay? And so Wednesday morning started with the Supreme Court hearing the arguments about the legality of birthright citizenship. And if you go to that article right there on the screen at wethepeopleconvention.org, you will see a very fair, complete analysis of what the whole birthright citizenship issue is about. Okay? The interesting thing was that President Trump went and sat in and listened to the oral arguments that morning, which had never been done before. And it just showed how important he thought it was. Unfortunately, I don't think it went very well, and I think we're going to be disappointed. Let me just recap what the issue is. The constitutional provision at the center of the case, known as the Citizenship Clause, is part of the 14th Amendment, which was added to the Constitution in 1868. The clause confers citizenship to anyone born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. It was intended to overrule the Supreme Court's notoriously bad 1857 decision in Dred Scott versus Stanford, holding that a black person whose ancestors were brought to this country and sold as enslaved persons was not entitled to any protection from federal courts because he was not a citizen. So the Trump argument was this was about slaves, not about illegal immigrants, which didn't even exist back then, okay? And that the Supreme Court should enforce the original intent of the law, all right? The problem is that there has been subsequent decisions by the Supreme Court which suggested that if you were just here and you have a baby, they are an American citizen because they were born on U.S. soil, and that's this whole birthright citizenship thing is about. Now, what's come out this week is astonishing because there's Chinese billionaires who are, it's an industry. It's literally an industry. There is going to be like by 2038 or something, 1 million Chinese babies who they flew to the United States, had the baby, and now they're back in China, who will be able to come to the United States and vote in U.S. elections. I talked to you a couple weeks ago about the Chinese who bombed the CENTCOM headquarters in Florida, and the one fled back to China. It turns out their parents were these anchor babies who came here, had the babies, and they then grew up to be Chinese terrorists. And Trump and the administration are arguing, you can't have this. It's stupid. Trump literally said it's stupid. And most other countries don't do this. But we have stupid justices. And it didn't sound good. Alito made a great statement to prove this shouldn't be, that you're not, if you come here from Mexico and you break into our country, you have a baby, you're not under the jurisdiction of our country. You're illegally here. You're still a Mexican citizen. You can't be a citizen, your baby can't be a U.S. citizen. Sounds too logical, right? I don't know. So what does it come down to? So, again, the Supreme Court's a bunch of weasels, okay? Because they don't want to take blame for anything. So they're going to reject this and say, well, we're not saying Trump's wrong. We're just saying, as president, he can't do this. The Congress has to change the 14th Amendment, okay? Which ain't going to happen anytime soon. So we'll see how it turns out. But, then Trump goes on, and we have this in the morning on Wednesday, Trump's at the Supreme Court. Then we have the Artemis launch, which I'm going to talk about in a second, okay? And then he speaks about the war on Wednesday night, and then he addresses the nation, and the next day he fires Pam Bondi. You talk about an amazing 24 hours. So let's cover that kind of in reverse order. So, Trump, some more. Hold on a second, get my video here of Trump. So Trump, fires Pam Bondi. Deputy AG Blanche will be the interim, okay? Pam Bondi is out as Attorney General. The Fox's report, she met with President Trump on Wednesday night before the Iran speech, and President Trump said, I'm replacing you. She's going into the private sector to do something that Trump thinks is important, but it's kind of like the Kristi Noem thing. bottom line is he fired her. And Bondi immediately left Washington. The president has reported discussed replacing Bondi with EPA Chief Lee Zeldin. That's not panning out. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche will replace Bondi in the next interim. Okay, so that's really interesting because Blanche was Trump's. He's the assistant AG. He was Trump's attorney in the lawfare trials in New York State, where they convicted Trump, of fraud, defrauding the bank, when the bank even said he didn't defraud us. Okay, so he has real close connection to this Blanche guy. Now, everybody started talking about Lee Zeldin, and then there's just a list of names as long as both your arms. Ted Cruz, Mike Lee from the Senate, just lots of people. We, the people, our organization, in this story that's on our website at wethepeopleconvention.org, we made the case that Harmy Dillon, who's already in the Department of Justice, who's the head of the Civil Rights Division, that she would be a good choice. And so I used an AI to help me write an article, which I then read and approved and edited, that makes the case for Harmy Dillon, because in my opinion, they were gonna try to appoint someone from within, right? Janine Pirro has been mentioned, stuff like that. But now I'm not so sure that's the case. That's so you can read our case for Harmy Dillon, but I was listening to the X22 report, which I do usually on Saturday mornings when I'm getting ready to do this podcast, because he's just a real interesting dude, has some very different views, and so he brought up something I think might be real, and that is, you as interim AG, this Todd Blanche can serve for 250 days or something like that, 241 days. That would take him through the election. And I don't think Trump wants to nominate someone before the election, because we don't have the House and Senate. We want to approve the kind of person that we want, who's a real fire breather, going to go after the insurrectionists, the traitors like Brennan and Comey and Strzok and Page and Obama and Clinton and all the rest of them, who deserve to be, arrested and tried and hopefully convicted of their crimes against our country. So this could be interesting, that he might not be in a hurry to replace the AG. And I'll tell you what, I'd be for that. This Todd Blanche guy is solid. Okay, he's already there. Might make some sense. So, while I was not a big fan of Pam Bondi, I didn't particularly support her choice when it was made. I didn't think she was tough enough. She certainly was smart enough. She certainly accomplished some good things. We have the lowest crime in 100 years. She convicted Antifa members. No one had done that before. She did some very good things. She did some things not so good. The handling of the Epstein files, I think she really did not handle what was going on in Minneapolis. She did not give ICE the protection they needed. Okay? She should have been right there. She should have gone there and challenged the Minneapolis mayor and the governor Walz for their stand about, go out and protest ICE and stop them from doing stuff. She should have challenged them and said, I'll arrest you if you keep saying that. She didn't do that. So Glenn Beck had a rant that I want to play that I think is important to kind of put in perspective his feelings about Pam Bondi. Here that is.
Some more good news here. Ding dong, Pam Bondi is out. It's not exactly the way the song went in The Wizard of Oz, but it's close enough for me. After 14 months of wasting time and spinning wheels. Now, I'm sure she did some great things, yada, yada, blah, 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 blah. I just am concentrating on what the New York Times is saying today, that Donald Trump has to get rid of her because she won't go after his enemies. Oh, can we stop for just a minute? Can we stop for just a minute? Let me ask you fundamental principle questions. Do not think on teams. Do not think, whoa, yeah, but you guys don't think that way. Let me just ask you fundamental questions. If somebody caused a pandemic, they let it go, they covered it up, they then knew exactly what caused it, then got in bed with giant corporations, made money on all of the vaccines that they knew were not doing what they were claiming it was going to be done. It killed millions of people. They lied over and over and over again, and millions died. Should anyone go to jail? Or should we just go, nah, I'm sure it won't happen again? Forget about the personalities and which side your team is on. Just answer that question. Do you want a medical system that can do that and get away with it? I think it's extraordinarily dangerous. But we're not prosecuting anybody. How about this? Forget Russiagate. Do you think that either side should be able to collude in the White House, spy on people illegally, concoct this whole story out of whole cloth, use it politically, and then use it to impeach? Forget Russiagate. Ask yourself, do you want your side to be able to do that? Or do you want the other side, whichever side it is, you want the other side to be able to do with it and get away with it? The answer is no. In both of those questions, the answer is no, right? New York Times, as usual, you're wrong again. This is not about Pam Bondi not going after his enemies. These are enemies, if the evidence proves it, these are enemies of the Republic. These are enemies against our very eternal principles that must never be violated, no matter which side violates it.
Yeah. And so that's what the leftists try to tell you. Oh, Trump's on a vendetta. Oh, yeah, he's just like Obama, right, who went after me, Tom Zalestowski, and you, and the Tea Party with the IRS, right? And just like Biden, who went after the Gen Sixers and threw them in prison. Trump's just like that, except we haven't thrown anyone in prison, right? But oh no, he's just fired because she won't prosecute his enemies. How about because she didn't prosecute the criminals? How about that? That's what we're really talking about. You need to defend that point. Again, we talk all the time about my job is to control the narrative. I will put that video up on our podcast page so you can share it with people using our chapters player. Just grab that link and send it to them. That's the point. He makes a few other examples also in that clip. I cut them out. We don't want lawlessness. We want the rule of law. You and I gave everything we had, our lives, our money, our blood, sweat, and tears, our sacred honor to save this country. We're here still in our 250th year because of what you and I did. And you don't do that by having a lawless government. And that's all we're asking for. And we can't get it. And then Tom Tillis, that piece of garbage, the senator, is saying he won't vote to confirm anyone who excuses January 6th. Excuses. Oh, he's the judge and jury. He knows what happened on January 6th. Do you, Tom Tillis? Do you know what happened on January 6th? You don't know crap, pal. Because it hasn't come out yet, but it's coming out. Oh, it's coming out. Don't you doubt it. Tom Tillis, you're going to look like the fool you are. How dare you judge people by the propaganda you wanted to swallow that the left fed you, you traitor. That's the kind of people we have serving in the Senate. Wake up, citizens. Vote for people that actually are Americans, have integrity, and believe in the truth, not political hacks and traitors like Tom Tillis. All right, So then we had the launch. Trump, goes to the court to hear the birthright citizenship, goes to Florida and watches the launch. And I hope, I didn't see any statistics on viewership. I hope it was huge. We watched it with our grandkids. It was awesome. Artemis II is about much more than another walk on the moon. And this is the point I want to leave you with, because it is amazing to me, particularly for those of us in our generation, where the moon project dominated our thinking. It was us against the Russians, who would get to the moon first, to prove whose system, capitalism or communism, was the superior system. That's really what it was about. It was symbolic. And so we were just riveted about every Apollo launch. We were on the edge of our seats because people had died. There was the ones who died when the oxygen in the capsule ignited and burned them alive. This is serious business. And yeah, I had a little bit of a lump in my stomach as it went up, holding on to our grandkids and hoping this thing doesn't blow up, because it could. It's dangerous business, but as Kennedy said, we do these things not because they're easy, but because they're hard. Okay? And so I hope you are proud that we're going back to the moon. But now I want to make sure you understand that this is a whole different thing. A whole different thing. It's not political. It's about national security and money. NASA wants humans living on the moon by 2028. 2028. This is 2026. 2 years. And here's the $20 billion plan to make it happen. NASA has unveiled new plans to establish a permanent lunar base starting with Artemis II mission, with costs expected to reach upwards of $20 billion. The ambitious three-phase plan will transform the moon into a testing ground for human survival in extreme conditions. The moon might be a place full of humans sooner than we think. NASA has much bigger plans than just another moonwalk. They are laying the foundation for humans to make moon home, and it's going to cost upwards of $20 billion. This proposed lunar base won't only stamp Americans as the leaders of the new frontier, but completely redefine space exploration and our understanding of space as we actually live there. The real purpose for the project is to turn the moon into a permanent testing ground for human survival. Just to give you an idea of what it's like on the moon, we're talking 250 degrees up above zero in the sunlight and minus 300 degrees in the shade. A 550-degree swing with nothing to soften the blow. How harsh is that? Man, that's pretty harsh. But no atmosphere means no protection from radiation, no weather to redistribute heat, and temperature shifts so violent they'd cook you, then freeze you solid. Some craters at the poles stay so cold, minus 400 degrees, they're literally the coldest spots in the solar system. Okay? Pretty harsh. So why are we going there? Okay? Well, we're going there because there is strategic minerals and things there that we're going to mine. Why the mining the moon is of national security interest. Mining for critical resources on the moon has emerged as a new frontier in the growing competition between the U.S. and China. Helium-3, found in much greater abundance on the moon than on Earth, is the primary driver for lunar resource extraction, giving us a necessity for two high-priority emerging technologies. One, nuclear fusion. Helium-3 is critical to have nuclear fusion, which is the safe kind of nuclear energy that just runs forever and could give us all the energy we needed. It's also critical for quantum computing, which is they're making huge advances on, that's going to completely change computing fundamentally, literally from a physical standpoint. H3 elemental properties enable the optimization and operationalization of fusion and quantum, both of which offer the capabilities of the highest caliber for their respective applications in energy efficiency and machine problem solving, cryptography, data modeling, theoretical research, drug discovery, etc. Failure to be first in securing moon-based helium-3 deposits threatens national security and undermines U.S. authority in the future outer space governance and exploration. The Chinese are going full bore. They will be there while we're there. It's a race. It's a race, okay? Now, I'll turn to it's a race. I do want to play this video because a lot of people are taking it's woke, right? Oh, what a surprise. There's a woman on the four-man crew and a black man and a Canadian and two white males. It's woke. It was done on purpose. Yeah, we get it. So, of course, what do the left do? The Telegraph, a lefty newspaper, wants to ask the black astronaut about why it's important that a black man's on the flight. He did a great job, and I wanted to play his answer about race. Listen to this.
I want to highlight, I guess, maybe one facet of this is the tension, I call it. I live in this, this dichotomy between happiness that a young woman can look at Christina and just physicalize her passion or her interest, or even if it's not something she wants to do, she can just be like girl power, and that's awesome. And that young brown boys and girls can look at me and go, hey, he looks like me and he's doing what? And that's great. I love that. But I also hope we are pushing the other direction, that one day we don't have to talk about these first, that one day this is just, and I listen to this, that this is the human history. It's about human history. It's the story of humanity, not black history, not women's history, but that it becomes human history.
Yeah, that's what we want, right? Martin Luther King, one day my children will be judged by the content of the character, not the color of their skin. Only the racists want to point out he's a black man. Only the racists want to make that point. Yeah, you lefties, you're racist. You're anti-white racists. This man, that astronaut, I don't care what color he is. I'm judging him on the fact that he is so good. He's one of the 4 going to the moon. She is so good. She's one of the 4 qualified to go to the moon. That's the goal. That's the goal. And then I have one more thing to tell you about the moon that you should look into, and I did add it to that page if you want to go to our page about the moon flight, and that is Musk and Bezos and all these other entrepreneurs are going to go to the moon, and they are going to they're going to mine the moon and be able to send energy back to the Earth through microwaves. 2 satellites orbiting the Earth, which would then send it down to Earth. The moon is going to be a huge answer to our energy concerns. Not kidding you, folks. That's what's going on. And oh, by the way, for all those who hate Musk, yeah, this Artemis rocket, which looked like a Saturn V, it is just like all of our other government programs. It's a total waste of money. This Artemis rocket costs like $40 billion. You use it once and it's done. Nothing returns to Earth except for the capsule. Elon Musk's new Starship 5, I think it's called, is bigger and will cost 1/10 the cost. And that's where the real moon missions are going to be, on Elon Musk rockets. And that's why Elon Musk's IPO, which they filed for this week, and it's probably going to be in June, is going to be the biggest IPO in world history. SpaceX IPO is going to come out of the gate and be valued at like $1.7 trillion because he's the one that can get it done the way it needs to be done to be affordable to explore space. And that's really the truth. So there's a lot more to this space flight than a walk on the moon. That was the point. Okay, we've got a couple more things to wrap up the first half of the podcast. It has to do with fraud. As you know, J.D. Vance has been named the fraud czar. This is critical. I told you that fraud is going to be a big part of the November election. So Vance's anti-fraud task force suspended 221 California healthcare providers over suspected corruption. Wasn't suspected, they did it. At least 221 healthcare providers in Los Angeles alone have had their operations suspended on Thursday after the federal anti-fraud task force led by J.D. Vance found widespread evidence of corruption. The latest total suspended healthcare provider marks a significant increase over what has happened in the past few years, and they are suspected of stealing $221 million, and several of them have already been charged, okay? And this is just the beginning, because while that was going on, Chris Rufo from I think it's from the Manhattan Institute, right? Christopher Rufo said that new report alleges $180 billion has been stolen in California. $180 billion, folks. Remember, I just said the Somali fraud in Minneapolis was $9 billion. This is $180 billion. A new report in City Journal says that at least $180 billion has been stolen from California taxpayers. The report from Christopher Rufo, Ryan Thorpe, Kenneth Shroop, and Haley Strack said the unemployment insurance, Medicaid, homeless programs, and welfare programs in California have all been compromised by criminals. Get this one example. This one example. In one case, a Romanian, the country of Romania, led fraud ring orchestrated a $5 million unemployment insurance scheme. Members allegedly recruited people to fill out fraudulent ballots, applications for unemployment, which they then submitted through the San Francisco, Southern California Unemployment Agency. And basically, they made $5 million just paying people to submit fraudulent unemployment forms. In another case, a Memphis, Tennessee rapper, bragged about stealing from California's unemployment program in his song EDD. He says, going to the bank with a stack of these. He did a video within a stack of these holding up Employment Development Department envelopes. Another rapper can be heard saying, you got to sell cocaine, but I can just file a claim to make the money. He's been arrested, okay, and charged. And there's just this whole story, which will be at wethepeopleconvention.org. And fraud is unbelievable. I said to you at the end of last week's podcast, fraud is not the exception, it's the rule. I am now more convinced than ever that after Woodrow Wilson and the left, the commies, moved into government, their plan was to bring these social programs, because again, socialism is the beginning of communism, right? Bring these social programs into our federal government, get you to fund them through guilt, steal your money through taxes, and then what did they do? They used it to rob us blind and fund their efforts to overthrow our government. I'm convinced of that. I think J.D. Vance is going to prove that. I think your hair is going to be on fire by November about how elected Democrats have been systemically stealing us blind. That's what I think is going on. Look for that. You heard it here first, okay? And I think it's really going to be true. Okay, we're going to wrap up the first half of the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned some things you didn't know. Got a lot more in the second half of the podcast. We're going to take a short break for these messages. You've been listening to the We the People Convention weekly news and opinion podcast. My name is Tom Zalestowski, and I'll be back with you in a couple of minutes. Here we go. The We the People Convention news and opinion radio program is paid for by donors like you. You can donate to the We the People Convention and support our cause by going to wethepeopleconvention.org or by sending your check in any amount to We the People Convention, P.O. Box 6211, Akron, Ohio 44312. When you're playing a video, including our podcast, you'll see this little cloud button. And if you click it, it'll actually download the video to your hard disk. And this works on our podcast page as well. If you're playing our podcast, and it's going to be loud, so I won't play it for much, but there's our podcast playing, and you can see this little, download button. Okay. The other thing you got to notice on our podcast page is that there's a link here where you can send me a message about this podcast. Hey, it was great. Hey, I didn't like it. What, something was wrong, or here's a correction, that kind of thing. You can use that link. And then these are the stories that I covered in this particular podcast. And you'll see there's links that go to the stories, to the articles that I used in reporting on that. So you can click on that. You'll also see that you can sign up for our emails and text messages, but you can also watch our podcast on Roku TV and on Amazon Fire TV. And these are the instructions for doing that. So this is all on our podcast page, right on the front page where the yellow button was. If you click there, this is our podcast page. These are the instructions for watching on Roku TV or Amazon Fire. And I watch our podcast on TV. It just feels more comfortable. So you can do that. We're also on Rumble. If you go to Rumble, you should join Rumble. And it's Tom Z at WTPC. You'll see our podcast there. So you can get us a lot of different ways, including on Apple iTunes. And then this is an audio version of our podcast. If you click here, it'll just play the audio of the podcast. It will not, show you the video. So people can, listen to that while they're jogging or, working out, working in the yard, or just relaxing and just want to listen to the audio and not watch the video. And again, this is available on phone, on your iPad, on your laptop, on your computer, any way you want. And you can share this whatever you see. If you're on a page that you really like, and you see an article that you think, geez, I've got to share this article, with someone in my family. You can send them an email by clicking on the little envelope. You can post it on Parler or MeWe. If you click on this, you get all kinds of options, where you can put it on Twitter or Facebook, whatever, which we don't support, but you can do whatever you want. So we ask that you share what you see on our We the People Convention site, and that you get more people to look at it, because that's the whole idea here, to help educate people, inform them. And then, as I said before, Link, we're not just about talk, we're about action. And in my podcast every week, which is published every Saturday, so if the new podcast usually comes out every Saturday, and in that podcast, I will ask you to do certain things that will help protect and defend your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. So that's the We the People Convention website. Come back often, use it to be informed, and share it with others. Thanks a lot. All right, and we're back for the second half of the podcast. Thank you for being with us. Thank you if you do donate to the We the People Convention. We appreciate that. We know that not everyone can do that. If you watch this podcast, there's 3 things you can do to help protect and defend your and our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. You can share the podcast with other people, because then they'll be informed and they can help us in the fight. You can take actions that we ask you to take in this podcast, like sharing certain stories, educating people, about, like Glenn Beck, that video. I asked you to share that because they're hearing from the left. They're hearing the propaganda. Oh, Trump just wants someone to go get his people. They don't follow the law. Man, believe me, that's just not true. It's up to you to share that. And then number 3, it's up to you to help, watch the podcast, share it, and then act, and then donate if you can, right? So we appreciate all of you who do those things. And we hope that you are motivated to do those things by what you hear in this podcast. And we thank you for joining us. So we're going to get on with the second half of the show, because there's a lot to cover. Still a lot of things going on in the world. That's just not the war. I talked to you last week about how lots going on in Europe. Trump and Rubio made those great speeches in Europe. You got to get the illegal immigrants out. You got to close your borders. You got to protect your culture if they don't want to assimilate. Well, this was a powerful story I was glad to see. Germany's Friedrich Merz plans to repatriate nearly 1 million Syrian immigrants. Wow, that's no small thing. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz met with Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara on March 30th And immediately coming out of that meeting at a joint press conference, Merz said that a significant number of Syrian refugees who've made a home in Germany will be repatriated to Syria. Whoa. How many are we talking exactly? Try 80% of Syrians in Deutschland, or 700,000 to 800,000. Now, that's how many Syrian immigrants will return to Syria from Germany over the next 3 years. The migrant issue that Merz inherited from his predecessor, Angela Merkel, who admits she did it on purpose. Angela Merkel's a traitor to Germany. She got rid of their nuclear power because she was believing the woke, climate nonsense, and she flooded their country with people who would never assimilate on purpose because she wasn't for Germany. She was a globalist. Anyway, he inherited from his predecessor, Angela Merkel. It's something that's required a good deal of focus throughout his term. Well, it appears Merz has made progress in his talks with al-Shara. He may face a tougher sell when he tries to convince those Syrian migrants to return home. It seems they're quite comfortable in Germany, just like in the United States, right? So how's he going to get them out? According to Reuters, Merz coalition government imposed tougher controls when it took power last year, as support from anti-immigration AfD party, we talked about them last week, winning in elections, surged in the wake of former Chancellor Angela Merkel's decision to admit around 1 million asylum seekers from countries including Syria and Afghanistan. If you're to believe al-Shara, he feels Syria needs those migrants to return home so that after years of destruction of businesses, schools, and nurseries and hospitals, his country would have those able-bodied young men to rebuild. That's a good point. These were young men, mostly just like here in the United States, that came across the border. Now Syria, which, Israel is now trying to get Syria back on its feet, right? He needs those people to help rebuild. Needless to say, as we've seen in America with the way the news media and the left have greeted President Donald Trump's border enforcement policies, Merz is facing some fierce resistance. So once again, the communists, the anti-Western civilization crowd, the Chinese who fund them, are in Germany, in France, in the Netherlands, in all these countries, pushing this bull, okay, and bribing officials to destroy their own countries. He's going to face that. But you know what? At least he's got it in his head. He's got to do the job. And if you got it in your head, you got to do the job, you'll probably do the job. Now, this is another story because we've been big fans of Viktor Orban, okay, from Hungary, because he's been defending Western civilization there against the EU woke socialist, communist, globalists, right? So they're trying to get rid of him. He's up for election. Operation Save Orban, Trump deploys Vance to Hungary. U.S. President Donald Trump gives a final heave to try and keep under pressure Prime Minister Viktor Orban in power. The Trump administration is going all in to save its number one ally in Europe. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance is set to land in Budapest on Tuesday for a high-stakes intervention that underscores how far the White House is willing to go to shore up Hungary Prime Minister Viktor Orban before the April 12th national election. Orban is failing in the polls as anti-corruption opposition candidate Peter Magyar surges ahead in his bold bid to claim power in Budapest after 16 years under the leadership by the ruling Fidesz party, which Orban leads up. Now, get this clear. Every front from Ukraine to Germany to France to England has been sending money and propaganda and things to undermine Orban. Okay? This is a coup attempt. This is not a fair election. Trump recognizes that and tries to square it. The outspoken U.S. Vice President will hold talks with MAGA allied Orban and then give a public address during a trip that directly involves Washington in the final stretch of a heated election campaign. Vance's visit scheduled for Tuesday and Wednesday was framed by Hungarian government spokesman Zoltán Kovács as a celebration of deep ties between the two countries. The visit highlights the strong and enduring alliance between Hungary and the United States, which they hope will make the Hungarian people say, yeah, we want to be on the side of Donald Trump, not on the side of failing Europe. And so we'll see if this works or not, but it shows you how serious it is on a global scale that our allies are under attack, and we need to know who's on our side and who's not, and defend those who are. So congratulations to President Trump and good luck, J.D. Vance, on that. This is a story worth watching because I really believe this is going to happen. I just have a feeling this is going to happen. Alberta, the Canadian province of Alberta, separatists claim to have surpassed referendum signature threshold. In Alberta, Canada, because Trudeau was so woke, so socialist, so anti-capitalism, so anti mining and drilling and oil and gas and minerals, that Alberta said we've had enough. And they've been doing a campaign to put a thing on the ballot, a vote on the ballot, to leave Canada. A leading figure in a better separatist movement claims the group has met the signature threshold to potentially trigger a referendum and is challenging Premier Daniel Smith to support the push for independence. Jeffrey Rath, the lawyer for Alberta Prosperity Project, told Post Media in an interview Tuesday that separatist canvassers had gathered more than the required 177,732 signatures and expects to far surpass that number before the May 2nd deadline. So a month ahead of time, they have the signatures. They want to leave Canada. Now, they don't necessarily want to become the 51st state. They want to become a sovereign nation that can do deals with the United States. And that would be good for us. And if they do that, I think some of the other Western provinces would follow. Canada is a mess. It's a socialist, globalist, leftist mess. And we're going to have problems with Canada. This is a good sign for us that they can't even hold their coalition together. And so this whole thing is a remaking of Trump. I mean, everyone's panicking because Trump is so aggressively challenging everything from NATO to the UN. And this came out this week on our X page at Tom Z WTPC. And this is important. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warns the organization faces collapse without continued U.S. funding, which contributes roughly $2.2 billion to the UN's core budget. The United Nations is on the brink of total collapse, he said. And I said, should we end the UN? Should we leave NATO? These relics of the Cold War have not only failed, they have undermined the interests of the United States, which funds them both. I, for one, want us to stop the charade and stop funding our enemies. We urge President Trump to do both. That's what I said on X. Why do we have the UN? It doesn't do anything. $2.2 billion? I just told you that the war in Iran cost 2.9. We can't afford to fund things that are against us. You just can't. And so we'll see, but the world is changing, and that's a good thing because the world has been a mess for a lot longer than we know, okay? And Trump is saying, no more, we're going to fix it. So back to the domestic situation, okay? Let me play this video while I gather myself from Prime Minister Melei, who talks about how nuts the left is. And then we'll get on with No Kings. Here we go.
At one point, I thought being on the left was a mental problem. The empirical evidence is so overwhelming, it never worked anywhere, and they refused to accept it. Therefore, I thought it was a mental problem. I mean, some kind of block that doesn't even let them see the numbers. They are enemies of numbers. They hate numbers. I don't know if lefties hate water or numbers more. I mean, I don't know if they hate bathing more than numbers. But what I discovered is that being on the left is a disease of the soul. The left is built on envy, hatred, resentment, unequal treatment before the law. They are very violent. And since they have no way or arguments to answer, they go for physical violence. Lefties always, let's say, resort to physical violence and all kinds of violent manifestations because they are unable to refute the arguments.
So we got the woke and the international side. And then this week, we had the No Kings rallies, okay? Another No Kings rally. So here in the United States, you heard Melei say that they can only become violent, that he thought it was a mental illness. And it's worse than that. So we had the No Kings rally a week ago today, and the Marxists spend billions to push their goal, which is what? to end the United States. Why are they doing this? Who are they influencing? Okay, that's the question. So I posted this story. It's from Fox News Digital, but they did a great job of explaining the No Kings rally situation. Okay, 500 groups with $3 billion in revenues behind them are the No Kings protests and the communist call for revolution. So here's what I put as the editor's note. So China paid $3 billion to fund 3,100 protests that they claim will draw 9 million protesters. That's $333.33 per protester. Per protester. If the Tea Party ever had $3 billion, how many tens of millions of people do you think we could have turned out to celebrate America? By the way, if you're impressed by their supposed 9 million protesters, and again, 3,100 events, no one's counting at any of them, but they're going to tell you they had 9 million people there. That's just made up. But let's assume that their lie is true. 9 million. You're impressed by that? Yeah, that amounts to 2.7% of the U.S. population. If they can only get 2.7% of the people to support their No Kings rally, and they paid a lot of them, how come half the U.S. Senate and half the U.S. House are in control by Democrat candidates? If they've got 2.7% of the population that's willing to come out and support their revolutionary ideas, even when they're paid, how can they possibly have 50% of the elected positions in the United States? There's only one answer. They cheat. It's just that simple. They cheated. And that's what Trump's trying to stop. And that's what all these fights we're having about the SAVE Act and all that stuff. They cheated. And so in this story, according to the copy of the permit for the flagship march in St. Paul, Minnesota, indivisible, a national well-heeled democratic political advocacy organization funded by George Soros is the lead coordinator of the protests. But Fox News Digital has also identified key participants by a network of radical socialist and communist organizations funded by Neville Roy Singham, an American tech tycoon and avowed communist living in China. And over nearly a decade, Singham has financed a constellation of activist institutions that promote revolutionary socialist politics and frequently collaborate in protest campaigns, including the People's Forum in New York and this No King Send. They are sending members to the protests, and one group said they plan to bring a message of revolution. They're not for America. They're not saying we're against Donald Trump because what he's doing is bad for Americans. They're not Democrats. They're not like the Democrats of old who said, well, you want to solve the health care problem. We want to do Obamacare. You want to do, private, health care. No. Their goal is revolution. That means the overthrow of the United States. How many of your friends and neighbors don't know that? How many of your friends and neighbors think the signs that said, out of Iran now, and no kings, Donald King, Trump's a king? How many of them don't understand this is an actual organized, funded effort to overthrow the United States? It's some of the posts circling on social media said, it's the time to go out and join the people. Get out our revolutionary message in front of them and turn a day of protest into long-term gains for the people's movement. The people's movement, Mao said. The Detroit activists from Akbayan, an organization aligned with communist movement in the Philippines, joined other groups within the Singham activist ecosystem. Posts circulating from activists associated with the Denver chapter of the Freedom Road Socialist Organization included imagery referencing the Red Army Choir, Soviet symbolism, and historical figures including Joseph Stalin and Mao Zedong. Oh yeah, they're not Americans, are they? The main chapter of the Party for Socialism and Liberation, working with activists connected to the Democratic Socialists of America, and the Answer Coalition called on supporters to join what organizers described as the unified leftist contingent. The message instructed advocates to meet at the southwest corner of Montgomery Park, declaring that the contingent would stand against imperialism, capitalism, and state violence. Don't you know? Except, don't you know that nobody does state violence quite like the commies, quite like Joe Biden, quite like Barack Hussein Obama, right? That's state violence when you sick the government on a political candidate that you fear in Donald Trump. Yeah, that's what they're promoting, state violence. You need to understand that's the enemy who we must defeat. How do we defeat them? You defund them, which Trump is doing with the NGOs. You defund them because we now understand they are funding themselves through fraud, through our social programs. It's a machine. It's a cash machine to have us, the American patriots, fund the communist overthrow of our country. We stop them by cleaning the voter rolls. We stop them by having the Supreme Court end the gerrymandering. We stop them by passing the SAVE Act. We stop them by having ICE agents outside of the polling locations. I told someone this week when I played the video for you, maybe I mentioned this last week too, of Hakeem Jeffries saying our biggest demand is that there not be ICE agents at polling locations. And I said, I'm already looking online to see if we can buy vests that say ICE on them so we can dress up and go to all the polling locations on election day in November. Okay? You got to stop them from cheating. Once you stop them from cheating, they won't have the political power to do the harm they're doing to us. Now, as Melei said in that video, they may resort to violence. Okay? We're going to have to be ready for that as well. But the bottom line is, we can make them go the way of the Whigs if we defund them and then we make them lose elections. It's that straightforward. But it's going to be hard to do that. Why? Because I said they cheat. This story was fun. Act Blue, their own lawyers, sounded alarm bells about illegal foreign contributions. Right? We had this story, back, when I think James O'Keefe was talking, who we support. Our organization uses some of your money to help fund James O'Keefe's efforts. And, their own lawyers are saying that they did not have checks and balances on the donations that were coming in from overseas to basically fund Obama and Biden and all the rest of them. They were laundering money from overseas, which is illegal. And we tried to stop them, but we just couldn't do it then, but now we're starting to move in that direction. Okay? That's really an important step for us, again, to cut out their funds, even if they're coming from overseas. And then, let me go to the next story here. Trump signed an executive order this week that says that you're not going to be able to do the mail-in ballots. Now, can he do that? I don't know. I mean, they started suing immediately, right? Immediately they started suing. And so, will this stand up in court? Well, why is he doing it? He's doing it because we don't pass the damn SAVE Act. Okay, that's the problem. And so, he's trying to take it in his own hands to try to fix the problem. But, it's just because our people won't act. It's just that simple. This story is very disturbing to me because it shows that the lawfare isn't over. Trump's January 6th speech is not covered by immunity. This is an Obama-appointed judge who says, all those lawsuits that were filed after January 6th by police officers, by congressmen, whatever. Well, even though the Supreme Court said you had presidential immunity from criminal prosecution, you're not immune from civil prosecution. You can't make this stuff up. President Donald Trump's speech in Washington on January 6th was not an official act and is thus not covered by immunity, a federal judge said on March 31st. President Trump has not shown that the speech reasonably can be understood as falling within the outer perimeters of his presidential duties. Lawmakers and others sued Trump, claiming his speech incited the crowd to go to the Capitol riot. Trump has sought the dismissal of the lawsuit, arguing he's entitled to immunity for official acts as president and that the speech was an official act. he addressed the crowd as the President of the United States, not as a private citizen. Supreme Court Justice ruled in 24 that the President enjoys immunity for core official acts, the presumptive immunity for acts within the outer perimeter duties, but that unofficial acts are not covered. Mehta, the judge, said the speech was focused on promoting his alleged 2020 victory rather than on carrying out official duties, such as ensuring the faithful execution of laws. The content of the list speech confirms that it is not covered by official acts of immunity, and therefore you can sue the heck out of him after he's done being president. If we don't defeat these people, if we don't put them in prison, if we don't arrest these radical leftist judges, we're going to be done as a nation. They're already talking about impeaching Trump. There's a congressman this week said, when we take back the House, the first thing we're going to do is impeach Trump. This time next year, we'll be having impeachment trials. We won't be doing anything else. We'll be impeaching Trump. If you and I don't find the strength to motivate each other and our fellow citizens to defend our republic by making sure that Democrats never, ever get in power again. It's just terrible. It's just terrible. And then speaking of things that weren't so good, I was sorry about this. This is Dr. Robert Malone, who was a real hero during COVID. He quit the CDC vaccine advisory role because the pressure, they were just getting their gears jammed and he couldn't get anything done. Dr. Robert Malone said on March 25th that he will no longer advise health officials on vaccines. I'm done, he told the Epoch Times. Malone was vice chair of the advisory committee on immunization practices, which advises the Center for Disease Control and Prevention on immunization. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. selected Malone and other ACIP members in 2025 after removing the previous slate, which he got lots of pushback on, right? And a federal judge recently ruled that Kennedy did not follow proper procedures in appointing the members that stayed the appointment. So here again, the judges, the leftists, he's the head of the CDC. He wants to get rid of these people, but you didn't follow the procedures, right? It's insane. But this is what we're faced with. That's why it's so hard. That's why Pam Bondi couldn't do a lot of what she probably wanted to do. This is what we're fighting. It's a real war, a real civil war. The judges also blocked changes to the CDC vaccine schedule, some of which were prompted by votes from the remade group. Malone, a former APAC TV host and adjunct professor at Louisiana State University, was upset by the decision, noting that the judge deemed him unfit, even though he has decades of experience in the vaccine field. And he just said, I'm done. Screw you. See, and this is the problem. It's tough to be a patriot when you're behind enemy lines, as it were. And I'm sorry that Dr. Malone is gone because we needed him, okay? But we still see RFK Jr. trying to fight the fight. MAHA, microplastics pharmaceuticals, listed as contaminants in water supply for the first time. This is a big step. I know a lot of you were worried since the story came out that all of us have plastic in our brains because of drinking bottled water, which they told us was so good for us. Oh, my goodness gracious. Let's see here. The whole story. The Trump administration on Thursday moved to list for the first time microplastics and pharmaceuticals under the Environmental Protection Agency draft list of contaminants impacting the nation's drinking water. In announcing the decision, the EPA billed the inclusion of microplastics and pharmaceuticals as a historic step for the Make America Healthy Again agenda, which aims to address toxic chemicals and plastic pollution in the environment that negatively impact human health. One analysis estimates that the average person ingests tens of thousands of microplastic particles each year through food, water, and air. Another study reports concentrations in the brain equivalent by mass to roughly a spoonful of plastics in every human brain. For too long, Americans have vocalized concerns about plastics and pharmaceuticals in their drinking water. That ends today, concurred EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin in a statement. Okay, so you can't say they're not doing nothing. They're trying, they're fighting, but you keep having judges and people within your own agency, bureaucrats undermining you. It's just brutal. It's just brutal. this was a good decision. This was something I was really excited about. This was about the Colorado Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled that this ban in Colorado, they passed a ban that said you cannot counsel people who think they want to have gender transition surgery. It's against the law. They actually did that because they can't make their case, and they sure as hell couldn't have a counselor say, hey, you're not a man, you're a woman. You're just a little confused. Can we give you some psychological health care? Oh, we can't have that in Colorado, right? So in an 8-1 opinion Tuesday, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that a Colorado law violates the First Amendment that is discriminating against the free speech rights of a Christian therapist who help minors embrace their biological reality and heterosexual inclinations. In Childs versus Salazar, Kaylee Childs, a licensed Christian therapist, challenged the 2019 Colorado law. That's a 6-year-old law banning conversion therapy that helped clients under 18 who want to rid themselves of unwanted gender ideologies that reject biology. Childs does not provide any type of physical altering service. Instead, she counsels her clients in order to help them achieve their psychological goals. So all she's doing is what a psychologist should do. And in Colorado, they made it a crime. Think about that. How sick are you? How nuts? How indoctrinated are you that lawmakers and judges in Colorado did this to kids? That's the most evil there can possibly be. And I'm so thankful the Supreme Court 8-1 said, no. But here's the part that's nuts. Look at what they did here. The case was based on the law violated the counselor's free speech, not that it violated the child's right to get good medical care, not that it violated the Hippocratic oath or that it violated the new things that the Psychological Association and these other medical groups I've reported to you have said this is not the proper treatment. The Supreme Court case had to be based on the First Amendment rights for free speech of this counselor. That's how warped our laws are. That's how sick our judiciary is. That's just wrong. They got to the right place, but they shouldn't have had to go that route. That law should have never gone into place. It literally legalized illegal crimes against children. In the United States of America, we did that. Wow. Okay. This is another good court case that I liked, okay? Federal court ends tuition, in-state tuition. I love this rate, okay? You're sitting there going, because again, why did they do it? Why did the left do it? Why did the people that the communist Chinese paid to elect to be in houses of state legislatures to put laws that say, oh yeah, if you're an illegal immigrant, we're going to give you in-state tuition, but an American who lives out of state has to pay twice as much to go to our state schools? How did that ever make any sense to anyone unless your job was the No Kings rally? To do what? Your job was to overthrow the United States, destroy the family, destroy our education system, right? So this was about time. Federal court ends in-state tuition for illegal immigrants. A federal judge has ruled against Kentucky's policy of granting in-state tuition to illegal immigrants, declaring it as unlawful under federal statute. U.S. District Court Judge Gregory F. Van Thohaven, a Bush appointee, issued the decision permanently blocking the state's tuition law on the ground it violates the Constitution's supremacy clause. The ruling follows a legal challenge by Kentucky Attorney General Russell Coleman and the Trump administration, who argued the policies unlawfully provide benefits to migrants in the country illegally. Federal law states that an alien who is not lawfully present in the United States shall not be eligible on the basis of residency within a state for any post-secondary education benefits unless a citizen or national of the United States is eligible for such a benefit, without regard to whether the citizen or national is such a resident. So again, it was a violation saying you're giving them financial benefits by being in your state when they're not a resident, but someone who's not a resident of your state, who's from the adjoining state, doesn't get the same benefit. So they threw it out. That's in Kentucky, a red state. They were doing this in Kentucky. How many other states? Now, this is a federal ruling. It'll probably be appealed, but it's a good thing because this ruling should help us get that out of other states as well. Okay? Let's see, move on to the next thing. So there was a poll that was done about the Democratic Party because you got all this stuff and the Dems are saying we're going to win in the fall, that Trump's terrible, the economy's terrible. We're going to lose the war, don't you know? We're losing the war. If you listen to NBC, CNN, all these people, we're losing the war. The economy's terrible. Well, it ain't great, but it ain't as bad as it was, and it's going to get a lot better. But the bottom line is it's all fraud. And so what's the truth? Well, this little video from CNN, it's going to maybe give you some truth. Watch this says.
No, not at all, at least when it comes when you isolate Democrats. I mean, these numbers are just atrociously awful. A double A for the Democrats here. I mean, just take a look here. Congressional Dems have the right priorities. Look at this. Overall, 74%, nearly 3 in 4 say no. Just 25% overall say yes. You might say, okay, well, at least Dems like Democrats. Not the case. Look at this. The majority of Democrats are independents who lean Democrats. Look at this. 55% say no, congressional Democrats do not have the right priorities. And then you just see a minority, 45% of Democrats say that congressional Democrats have the right priorities. This, to me, just jumps out at the screen because it screams primary challenges all over the map. And it says that even if Democrats don't like Donald Trump, they don't like their own party either when it comes to Congress. And overall, I mean, my goodness gracious.
So this is sort of like Democrat on Democrat crime here. What's overall approval among Democrats of their leaders?
Yeah, okay. So, you speak about Democrat on Democrat crime. And I want to know how unusual what we're seeing right now about how Democrats feel about Democrats in Congress is. Take a look at this. This is a trend line going back through the years, midterm elections in which there's a GOP president. Look at this. In 2006, Dems' net approval of congressional Democratic leaders was plus 28. You go back to the last midterm, look at that, plus 19. Very much on the positive side. The bottom has fallen out. The bottom has fallen out. Minus 4 points. That is Democrats. Democrats' own net approval of their own congressional leaders. Even Democrats don't like their own leaders when it comes to Congress.
So what's the truth? How can you win in the fall if those are your numbers? And you can tell me, well, there were 3,100 protests. There's a movement. Americans are unhappy with Trump. No, they're not. No, they're not. That 2.7%, go to the polls, vote for your favorite commie Dem. You ain't winning jack. It's real simple. If we turn out and if we stop them from voting illegally, they can't win anything. Anything. All right? But my goodness gracious, you got to just fight through all the lies and propaganda because, again, I bet you half of you people at least watching this podcast think, oh, there's no chance we can win. We can't win. Oh, look at the polls. Look at what we're reading. Trump's approval is at only 40%. People aren't stupid. When you say you're going to impeach the president as your act, what does that do for the average person? Does that lower your gas prices? Does it lower your food costs? Does it increase your wages? No. Why would you vote for that? And then they're going to say, well, he's trying to persecute us, but we're going to run to persecute him. It's insanity. Your job, my job, is to expose the insanity. Okay? Unfortunately, we got to deal with, our buddies in the House and the Senate, the RINO Republicans. Trump, GOP's Thune and Johnson reached deal on funding DHS after the fiasco of a week ago, where the Senate passes funding for DHS except for ICE thinking that Trump is with them. It goes 5 hours later. They do it at 3 o'clock in the morning. By 8 o'clock in the morning, Johnson, the House Speaker, is out calling it a joke. And by noon, the House says, we're not voting for this crap. And the president agrees with them. By this week, they finally come together and go, whoa, we made a mistake. The only way to do this, because the Democrats will never vote to fund ICE ever. Wow, what a surprise, huh? You didn't know that before this happened? Right? We're going to do reconciliation. So they're going to pass the thing the Senate did. The House this time is going to approve it. They're going to file a reconciliation bill. Trump is going to keep paying the DHS people like he is through June. He wants it on his desk by June 1st, and they say they're going to do it. And hopefully it's going to have the SAVE Act in it. It's going to have the no trans stuff in it. It's going to have the other things that the Democrats won't vote for in it. I hope it works. I hope they can pull this off. It's just frightening to see how inept the Republicans are. It's just frightening. But they haven't done anything on the SAVE Act because they don't have the votes among Republicans. That's the sad part. So the good news is, while they say they got their act together, okay, and they're going to do this, 2 states, Florida and Mississippi, have actually now passed basically the SAVE Act. Florida and Mississippi have passed strict measures requiring proof of citizenship in order to vote. Florida's new measure requires potential voters to provide a birth certificate, naturalization certificate, or a passport. Those seeking to vote must also match their citizen status with the state's status shown on their driver's license. Similarly, Mississippi, new measures compel electoral officials to check in those registering to vote, have a driver's license number on their voter application. So that's 2 states, and they joined South Dakota and Utah that previously enacted it. So are you doing that in your state? Are we requiring proof of citizenship in your state? This is a direct ask. Do you know? Could you look it up this week? And if you don't, could you take the Florida bill and send it to your legislatures and say, why don't we do this? We can fight this fight multiple ways. We can't just let Washington dictate everything, particularly with the mess we have there of people who can't pass something that 85% of Americans want. Right? How are we going to rely on them? Unfortunately, we don't have the ability to throw the ones out in the primary this year that we should, because President Trump won't endorse against them. And so we got to do it some other way. Let's do it through the states. Okay? Let's do it through the states. Speaking of states and things that they've done to this, some of you were confused and encouraged by this, but it's still not the right answer. Colorado Appeals Court overturns Tina Peters' sentence in election security breach. Okay? So this kind of got some headlines, and it should. Colorado Court of Appeals overturned Tina Peters' prison sentence Thursday morning and ordered a lower court to reevaluate her punishment. Now be careful you're hearing the words I'm saying. They overturned her prison sentence and ordered the court to reevaluate her punishment. They did not overrule her conviction. They upheld her conviction. They said she did what they said she did, and it was illegal, and it was wrong for her to share the voter files to prove that they cheated. I disagree with that. I hope someday we can get a hold of that information to prove the 2020 election was stolen in Colorado. But the good news is that she's going to get less of a sentence. Peters, 70, was found guilty in 2024 of orchestrating a security breach of her county's election integrity system in 2021 in a failed attempt to find evidence of electronic voter manipulation. She found that the voter manipulation was there. She didn't fail to prove it. She just couldn't get it. She wasn't allowed to present it. Peters was sentenced to 9 years in prison. In a 77-page opinion, the appeals court said it reversed her sentencing because it was based in part on improper consideration of her exercise of her rights of free speech. The judge wrote that the lower court impose Peter's sentence in part because Peters continued to spread her belief about election fraud, which the sentencing judge, 21st Judicial District Judge Matthew Barrett, noted was particularly harmful because of the position he held. The tenor of the court's comments make clear that it was felt the sentence length was necessary, at least in part, to prevent her from continuing to espouse views that the court deemed damaging. When handing down the sentence, Barrett called Peters a charlatan who had found a way to profit off of lies and would continue to do so if she remained out of prison. But the court failed to acknowledge, as judges wrote in their opinion, that Peters is no longer the county clerk and no longer in a position to engage in conduct that led to her conviction. So it cannot be said that the lengthy prison sentence was specific for deterrence. To the contrary, the sentence punished Peters for her persistence in espousing her beliefs regarding the integrity of the 2020 election. The judge gave her 9 years because he was a lefty who wanted to give you all a lesson, to show you. Don't you dare stand up against what we're doing. Don't you try to stop us from cheating. We'll punish you so you will back down. Tina Peters is a patriot. She didn't back down. She still is standing strong. She did not disavow the fact that they cheated in that election. And we're going to prove it. Now, her sentence is going to be reduced. We'll see what happens, how much they reduce it. And President Trump is pressuring Paulus, the governor, to pardon her. And he's thinking about it because Trump is threatening to take money away from the state of Colorado if he doesn't. But again, First Amendment, not the real rule of law, was what the judges decided on. We still haven't had anybody look at those files and say, did they cheat or not? Because their whole case was, you're not allowed to look. Yeah, we need to be able to look. Hopefully that's changing. All right, just got a couple more things here to wrap up the podcast this week. Some great news, good news. U.S. payrolls rose by 178,000 in March, more than expected, and unemployment went to 4.3%. That's really unexpected. The U.S. labor market bounced back in March with job creation much stronger than expected, though the broader picture of a slow growth labor market held intact. Non-farm payrolls rose a seasonally adjusted 178,000 during the month, a reversal from the 133,000 decline in February and better than Dow Jones consensus estimate of 59,000 was expected. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported Friday. Friday's numbers were revised down by 41,000. February's numbers were revised down by 41,000, while January's was revised up by 34,000. I know I'm giving you a lot of numbers. Bottom line is the tariffs haven't really hurt the jobs. We're holding our own. We're still adding jobs. Even AI hasn't harmed it, okay? And so, this is a good sign, and the markets were surprised, okay? They were surprised. So we'll see, what happens. The good news was it wasn't government jobs. All during Biden, all the jobs went to illegals and to government jobs. Now, the illegals aren't getting any jobs. They're leaving the country. It's all going to Americans, and it's not government jobs. These are people who are going to earn money and pay taxes. As has been the case, healthcare was responsible for much of the growth. They added 76,000. Let's see here. And construction saw an increase of 26,000, while transportation and warehousing posted gains of 21,000. On the downside, the federal government saw a loss of 18,000, while financial activities lost 15,000. So we're doing the right things. The economy is solid. We just got to get through this war, get the price of oil back down, and we'll be right on plan. And the other good news is lots of people are getting their tax returns, and it's helping them with the higher gas prices and things. It couldn't have been timed better. I don't know if Trump did that, did the war thing with that as part of his consideration, but I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt it. The average American is getting a couple $1,000s more than they expected in their tax return, and that's helping to tide them over. So, keep perspective. Keep perspective. This was really important to me because I keep telling you we got to do this. 4 million children have been signed up for Trump accounts, according to the IRS. American taxpayers have signed up over 4 million children to the tax advantage Trump accounts, and more than 1 million of those accounts have elected to receive the 1,000 co-pilot program contribution from the government. They are set on March 31st. So 4 million accounts have been set up, and 1 million of them has said, we want the government to give us $1,000. That's great. That's awesome. Okay? Contributions to the accounts can be made starting July 4th. All eligible children may receive deposits from parents, relatives, friends, employers, state governments, philanthropic organizations, and individuals subject to an annual limit. The Trump accounts, formerly the Invest America accounts, were established under the One Big Beautiful Bill. Every child under 18 who is a U.S. citizen and has a valid Social Security number is eligible to open a Trump account. In addition, any child born between January 1st, 2025, last year, and December 31st of 2028, for 2 more years, can get initial seed contributions of $1,000 for the government. All you do is you file this 4547 form with your taxes as a parent, and they'll open the account for you. And it gets invested in mutual funds and stock things so that it will compound over their 18 years of life. They can't take it out till they're 18. I'm telling you, this is a game changer. This is an investment in our youth that we should have been making years ago. If you have a grandchild, if you have anyone under 18, get them an account. Why not? Even if you put $200 in it, it's an investment in their future. The Trump accounts are going to be a big success. Years from now, people will talk about, wow, that was a good idea. And yet, most people today just blow it off like, it's just $1,000. Just $1,000? You're complaining about $4 a gallon gasoline, and the federal government is going to give us $1,000 of our tax money back to your child, back to your grandchild. You ought to take them up on it, right? You ought to take them up on it, because it sure is better than having the hands of the government. Okay, so now I'm going to close with this. It's Easter, and at the beginning of the show, I wished a happy Easter to those who are Christians and a happy Passover to the Jewish people who are watching this show. And it's an important time of year. President Trump posted this short video at the whitehouse.gov website. It's now on our website. If you go to wethepeopleconvention.org, under the video section, you'll be able to watch this. President Trump had some good words to share, and I want to share them with you as we close this podcast and celebrate Easter.
This Holy Week, I'm proud to join with Christians across the country and around the world to celebrate the most glorious miracle in all of time, the resurrection of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. In his life, Christ displayed true humility. In his death, he modeled true love. And in his resurrection from the tomb, he proved that even death itself will not silence those who place their trust in Almighty God. As it says in Gospel of John, for God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, for whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. Eternal life, such beautiful words. This Easter, millions of Christians all over the globe will be reminded that because of what Jesus did on the cross, all of us can live every day with hope in God's promise, knowing that in the end, evil and wickedness will not prevail. In the spirit of joy and renewal this Easter, we also celebrate the extraordinary resurrection of faith and religion in America. As I have often said, to be a great nation, you must have religion and you must have God. In churches across the nation on Sunday, the pews will be fuller, younger, and more faithful than they have at any time in many, many years. Religion is growing again in our country for the first time in decades. Happy Easter to all. May God bless you. May God bless the United States of America. Our country is doing so well like never before. Thank you.
I hope sincerely that this Easter restores your faith, your belief in God, in heaven, in a future that is not this world, that it restores your faith in your fellow man, that we can be good, we can do good, we can solve problems, we can tell the truth, right? We can live by the Bible, we can follow the 10 Commandments. I hope, I really sincerely hope that you will have a great Easter and a great Passover, and that we will come out of this stronger than ever to face the trying times we're going to face. Say a prayer today for our serviceman, our pilot who's down in Iran, the fighter pilot that ejected and has not been found yet as I'm wrapping up this podcast. Pray that we can find him and that he's alive and that we can restore him, bring him back to our country. And then pray for President Trump and all his staff. The job they're trying to do is unbelievably hard. Unbelievably hard. Keep them in your prayers every day. All right? I hope that you will tell others about this podcast, right? That's the thing you got to do. Tell people about this podcast, share it, act upon it, show the Glenn Beck video, share President Trump's video with people to get the message out. If you can donate, please do. Go to wethepeopleconvention.org. We're getting a lot of asks for things to do in the upcoming elections and the primaries and things. We're trying to help people. We've been helping, PragerU and Turning Point and AFP and people like that. We're trying to do what we can as an organization. If you can give, please go to wethepeopleconvention.org. But be happy. Spring is coming. Better weather is coming. Love your family. Enjoy the holiday with them. And don't let anything get in your way. Don't let anything get in the way of your happiness. Okay? That's the goal. Be a happy warrior. Be engaged. All right. I'm going to wrap up the podcast for this week. You have a great week. Be healthy. God willing, we'll both be back here again next week. You've been listening to the We the People Convention weekly news and opinion podcast. My name is Tom Zawistowski. May God bless you and continue to bless the United States of America. Bye now.
So proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight. Gallantly streaming, and the rocket train.